small group, but Krista is here, and we're all excited about this. And our Wayne is here to do his wonderful job of moderating. Please help yourself to cookies. Please help yourself to water. And without further ado, let's get started.
Good, good. Hi there, everybody. Good to see you here. I would like to pray to start off, if you wouldn't mind. I think this is I like to pray with all these sessions, but this one in particular, let us pray. Great God, beyond all imagining, thank you for your presence, your call, your gifts. Every good and perfect gift comes from you. Thank you for this time. Thank you for the gift of being able to take time out from earning money and various responsibilities to focus on the work of a talented writer, to hear a committed teacher who has real affection and insight into this writer. Help us to hear what you would have us hear and then do what you would have us do. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Well, we have a very nice combination for you. Tonight we have a blazing talent. How many of you have read the book? Many of you have, not all. I do commend it to you. It is an unusual book. Young adult fiction is not something I read typically. I think maybe if I look back over my whole life, this would be the first young adult fiction book that I have read. When I was growing up, this was not a category. We didn't classify young adult fiction as young adult fiction. Now this is where you find John Green, a lot of other people, in your Indianapolis libraries. So we've got this book. So it's been made into a movie, as have a number of other John Green books. He is really, he's really a celebrity. Not a recluse exactly, but somebody who is not that easy to invite to speak to your church group or your community group. This church has tried in previous years to get John Green to come in and speak. He's an Indianapolis resident, he and his family. Unsuccessfully. Usually Second Church is not unsuccessful when they go after people to speak. It's a nice place to speak. It has a good reputation, yada, yada, yada. We have not been able to get him. But we have done tonight the next best thing. Krista Stubbs is a high school teacher, and she is somebody that I heard of by reputation as being a very talented, committed high school teacher. Then I talked to her in the midst of an unusually busy schedule. I talked to Krista about how she entered into the field of teaching high school. This is particular of interest to me because I have been interested somewhat, at least, in teaching high school. When I was growing up, I thought of it as a vocation, but I've always been afraid of it because I remember all too well what I was like when I was in high school, and so I have a little bit of a fear of encountering people like that. Krista has overcome that, and she does have what we call in the church business a call story. She has a very intriguing tale about how this happened, that she ended up being a high school. Let's start there. How did you get to where you are now, Krista, as a high school teacher?
I don't ever remember. Well, there was a brief period where my greatest aspiration was to be the checkout girl at the grocery store because it was so fun with the conveyor belts. But after that passed, I just always wanted to be a teacher and used to set up my dolls and make all the neighbor kids come and learn so that I could teach and coerce them in various ways. And I never really thought of anything else until I got to high school, and most of my friends were, had what I thought to be larger aspirations.
Yes.
I'm going to be a scientist or a doctor, or I'm going into business, and I felt like, oh, I should want to be something bigger. And so when I went away to school, I definitely, I took a pre-med schedule my first semester, and developed a close relationship with a puke bucket during that time. And then I switched into journalism, and I kept coming back to, well, maybe I won't be one of the doctors who treats people, but I could teach doctors. That would be exciting. Or, yeah, I'm kind of tired of being around journalists, but maybe I could teach journalism. And any little angle I went after, it always came back to teaching that. And so finally, I just surrendered to what I felt was what God desired for me to do. And once I did that, life was just easier. So.
Have you ever met up with people like me and been tempted to go on into something else, or it stayed with you the whole time since you've gone into it?
I actually left. I don't know if it's fair to say that I left, but I decided I would get into writing instead of grading papers for a living.
Yeah.
So I went into technical writing, and that was just not enough. I kept teaching other people how to do it better.
Yes.
And then I thought, okay, this is crazy. Now I'm back to teaching again. I did get a job offer from Macmillan Publishing, and I just thought, no, that's not going to work. So I went back to teaching again. I think it's just where I'm supposed to be.
Yeah. This particular session, it's class number 6 in a class series of 7, is where we switch gears. We've had an author in each one of the first 5. In this class, we don't. We have a book without the author, but we're going to ask a noted teacher to tell us about the book that she uses in her classroom and has taught on a number of occasions. Tell us why this book has stood out in the way it has, and John Green.
Well, I teach at Guerin Catholic High School, and we start each class with 15 minutes of silent reading, and students can read whatever they want. And so I first came across John Green's work because the kids were reading it.
Yeah.
And I kept seeing this book cover, and someone donated one to the class library, and we could never keep track of it. Someone was always loaning it to this person and back, and it was just, they devoured it so quickly. And so anytime that happens, I want to know what it is, you
Absolutely.
know. And I have to be honest, that I really chalked it up to just being, you know, maybe cheesy adolescent feel-good story. And I didn't read it for a long time. And one of the students said, no, you really should read this. This is really good. And I said, is it really? Yeah, it really is. You would really like it. So I promised I would. And as soon as I don't think I was more than 2 or 3 pages in, and it had me. Okay. And I generally don't like to read cancer books.
It isn't your favorite kind of book.
I'm a crier. I'm a crier, and so I was a little reluctant for that reason too. But I love the way that this is not a cancer book.
Oh, that's for sure.
And it's just a beautiful story that has great literary quality, in my opinion. And so I love it that the students love to read it, because whatever they can soak up in that sense is fantastic.
Has this book, do you teach other John Green books, Krista, or is this the one that's used in your class?
We don't teach it. Like we're not as a group all sitting around and reading it. We have the opportunity to talk about books that we're reading in our SSR time, what we call it. And so they'll bring it up, and we'll talk about different passages that we liked. And but I haven't had a formal lesson through the book with the students. It's mostly been informal.
My father died of, didn't die from Alzheimer's disease, but he had it. When you have Alzheimer's disease, usually you don't die from that, but you die from what Alzheimer's disease clears the way for. And through that experience, I started going to Alzheimer's disease support groups. It was that opening scene in The Fault in Our Stars where it seems to me anyway, that he gets the support group and how awful some of them can be so quickly. As if he does this so quickly with that, this has to be a terrific book.
And that's a fantastic scene in the literal heart of Jesus.
Oh, literal heart of Jesus. Yeah, just the way. Well, let's just hear you a bit now on this book, and tell us about it and about what you'd like us to hear concerning it.
Well, I pulled a couple quotes. This is one that I'm that person who highlights and underlines even when I'm reading just books for myself. And I was really struck with the incident that happens with Isaac in the very beginning and his girlfriend. So if you've read the book, you might remember Isaac comes to support group. He's going to lose his other eye to cancer and be blind. And the girlfriend that he has is, of course, promised to love him no matter what, and unfortunately breaks up with him and doesn't ever email to see how he's doing or anything. And this is a line that we hear from Augustus, because he says that love is keeping the promise anyway. And there's just a lot of, I don't know if you found yourself being struck by some of the passages as you were reading it, but that was one that hit me because it's true. You know that you're in it for the long haul, and it's why we have the promise, for better or for worse, when we commit to someone. So I loved that passage, and I think it captures a lot of what he wants to communicate about teenagers. I think there's a misconception that they don't feel deeply, that they aren't insightful, that they don't have a world perhaps that even adults don't know about. I think especially when they go to Amsterdam, and it's the scene where Hazel and Augustus are listening to Anne Frank's father in the background talk about Anne Frank. And I think I have it, but one of the things that he said was that he had no idea, this is Mr. Frank, he had no idea that Anne felt so deeply about so many things. So I think that's one of the reasons it has great appeal to young adults, is that I think that it's true that you feel misunderstood, and you're in that transition between childhood and adulthood, and you're having a great deal of insight and maturity of feeling, and often you're not taken seriously for that. So I love the book for that reason. Yeah. So I think that it portrays some pretty phenomenal individuals, and I don't see that as being unreasonable. Yeah. I feel like these are people that are very real. So the other picture that I was coming up with, I think there's some darkness in this book too. And you may remember this line, pain demands to be felt. And I actually overheard a couple of my students 2 weeks ago. We were, studying for finals, and one of the kids said, "Oh my gosh, I'm so tired. My head hurts." And she leaned over and she says, "Pain demands to be felt." And I didn't even set that up. That was just all on them. It was kind of cute. But it's a great book about grief and suffering. It brings up a lot of really big questions. And I think they're questions that adults struggle with. I think they're questions that teenagers struggle with. What happens when we are gone? Yeah. What happens when our loved ones are gone? And what do we want to know has happened? What do we choose to believe has happened? And is there worth in our suffering? Is there such a thing as redemptive suffering even, or is it meaningless? Is there? Do you have to live a life with a meaningful purpose, or as Augustus says, if you either have to live a meaningful life or die a meaningful death? And so I just think it raises lots of really good questions, and not all of them are answered. In fact, I don't think a lot of them are answered, and that's the beauty of it too, because I think you need to leave room for mystery.
Yeah. Yeah.
What was do you have a favorite part? I have marked all kinds of things, but.
Yes.
Well, I think tying to what you just said, I think it's like a novel that they are chasing, if you will. Like it has a mystery, it kind of ends and it kind of stops. It's the same thing about this book. It doesn't just stop, but it sort of does. I mean, a lot of those sort of deeper questions don't get answered. There aren't answers.
That's exactly right. What I found very interesting, so I went to John Green's website. I was just kind of looking around, and there's a part of his website where you can post comments. And what was fascinating to me, and I bookmarked a couple of them, I'll show you, was fascinating to me how many people have asked questions, what has happened to Hazel Grace? And just as Hazel Grace wants to go to see Van Houten, is that his name?
Van Houten, right.
Houten, which right here. So this is a writer, or this is a girl from Iran. And let me see if I can make this a little bit bigger for you. Anyway, she says, there is just one question about the story. What happened to Hazel Grace Lancaster after Augustus's death? She dies, she gained her healthy. What happens to lovely Hazel? Please tell me. And if you scroll through here and look at all of these, you know, why did Peter Van Houten can't come to the funeral? And people will comment about that. And here's another one. Why is the movie so much different? I need to know. I loved that we become so involved with the book, and the characters, when you write it well, you feel like you know these people, and you want to know what happens. And so he writes about characters who want that, and the same thing
That's
is
right.
happening.
For any of you who haven't read the book, this book turns on, structured, on the search for the ending of a book which ends in mid-sentence in Imperial Affliction. It's the leading character's favorite book. And she's trying to, and she eventually goes to talk to him with her boyfriend.
And there's a lot of parallels, I think, structurally. An Imperial Affliction is a book that does not exist. Okay.
In case you're wondering.
So that is a fabrication by John Green. And if you noticed at the beginning of the book, he quotes the author that does not exist of the book that does not exist. And so he has written an epitaph about the Dutch tulip man. And what I thought was interesting is he, on his website, or maybe it was an article, or I think it was an interview that I read, that F. Scott Fitzgerald, Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby is one of his favorite novels, and that book starts the same way, that F. Scott Fitzgerald wrote an epitaph quoting a piece of text that doesn't exist in a book. He created the title of the book and the author and the quote, which is unique, I think. And of course, an Imperial Affliction is an allusion to a poem by Emily Dickinson. And if another reason why we English teachers love this book is that it's just full of poetry and allusions to good poems. So that's fun for me.
Aren't you terribly disappointed, though, that Van Houten was such a not nice guy?
I think part of the beauty, yes, and yet I think
He should have been, you know.
you want that. You wanted that so badly. That was such a disappointment. And yet, if you think about, you know, remember when Hazel is looking at the website of Augustus's ex-girlfriend who had died of cancer, and someone posts, "We were all wounded in your battle," and she's terrified of being a grenade.
Right. Yes.
And part of her wanting to know what happened in this book is, the question she wants to know is what happens to this girl's mother? Because what's going to happen to her parents when she dies? You know, she worries about ruining so many lives. And I think we see that faith piece coming out, because here's Van Houten, who is not a man of faith, who has a particularly bleak outlook on life, I think, and even afterlife. And how's that working for him? You know, it's not. He's an alcoholic. Mm-hmm. He's devastated by his daughter's loss, and has never recovered. So I think it's unfortunate from a literary standpoint. It fits very nicely with that. It does, doesn't it? Because that's the reality. The reality that a lot of times people just don't recover. And I think we probably all know someone who never recovered from the loss of someone that was very dear to them, especially a child. So I think that that sense of realism is there. And he's a little bit of a dynamic character, because he does, you know, he's not all bad. You know,
If he'd have been fabulous, it would have ended up being cheesy.
I agree. He's real. You know, none of us are entirely good or entirely bad, and there's good in everyone and a little bit of pathetic in everyone too. So
It is interesting, isn't it, how the reality or the unreality of these stories is a pretty consistent question or theme, and that's probably why in the beginning, I don't know if you remember this note, Krista, right in the beginning, right after the quote from An Imperial Fiction, Green writes a note, and you can tell he's a bit sensitive on the question of whether fiction is fiction. If it is fiction, why is it important and all that? He says, this is not so much an author's note as an author's reminder of what was printed in small type a few pages ago. This book's a work of fiction. I made it up. Mm-hmm. Neither novels nor their readers benefit from attempts to divine whether any facts hide inside the story. Such efforts attack the very idea that made-up stories can matter, which is sort of the foundational assumption of our species. I appreciate your cooperation in this matter. Mm-hmm. So here's somebody who's so good at his craft that he is here protecting it, mm-hmm. or restating it.
Well, and I don't know if you're familiar with the Crash Course series. You're probably familiar with the Crash Course series. So John Green, I show them in class all the time, but they are on YouTube. They are short videos. Really, it's a crash course in lots of different things. So different history topics and lots of novels that you would read in high school. And so I thought I would show you a clip talking about getting inside the writer's mind. I think when you see him talking about literature, he's very funny, and it's exciting, I think. And the kids love it. I mean, I think they're hilarious. Sometimes I think I laugh more than they do, but. So this is John Green. Let's see if I can get it full screen first, and then we'll play it.
There he is.
Oh, it's going to make us watch. These are funny.
So last night, Kendall snapped me and is all like, come over. And I'm like, ugh, I'm binging on my shows, girl.
Okay.
Hi, I'm John Green. Welcome to Crash Course Literature. Today we're going to talk about Oedipus. Leo Tolstoy once famously wrote that all happy families are alike, but each unhappy family is unhappy in its own way. And I certainly hope that there's no family as unhappy as Oedipus's. Ancient Greek playwrights really specialized in the dysfunctional family. I mean, they have plays about wives killing husbands, parents killing children, children killing parents, siblings killing each other, and they also wrote tragedies. But it's hard to imagine a more tragic, dysfunctional family than the Theban clan that Sophocles writes about in Oedipus the King. I mean, except for the Kardashians.
Mr. Green, who are the Kardashians? That sounds exotic. Is it something from Star Wars?
Oh yeah, me from the past. You don't know about the Kardashians. Right now, to you, the only Kardashian you know is O.J. Simpson's defense attorney. Anyway, don't worry about it. Just imagine a green light on the other side of the bay that represents the glory
Gatsby
you'll
reference.
never reach. That's the Kardashians.
So every crash course has all kinds of fun little graphics and
Okay, so Oedipus is king of Thebes, having solved the riddle of the Sphinx and saved the city from destruction, but now a plague is devastating Thebes, and various oracles and bird entrails suggest it's because the murderer of the old king, Laius, still lives there unpunished. Oedipus decides to investigate the murder, only to discover that, mind blown, he is the one who killed Laius and married his queen, Jocasta. Then he finds out that Laius was actually his father, and Jocasta is his mother, so he's had 4 children with his mom, fulfilling an earlier prophecy because bird entrails are never wrong. It's the old accidentally kill your father, accidentally marry your mother plot. It goes way back. Freud can tell you a lot about it at Crash Course Psychology. Anyway, Jocasta hangs herself and Oedipus gouges out his own eyes with her jewelry, then goes into exile. In subsequent plays, his 2 sons murder each other and one of his daughters commits suicide. So, you know, it could have gone better. So for a little context, theater was a really big deal to the Greeks. I mean, if you were a male citizen, not a woman, not a slave, attending it was your civic duty. It was sort of like voting, except that it began with ritual animal sacrifice, so it was really nothing like voting. But this civic duty aspect is interesting because a lot of the plays ask really troubling questions about power and control and the wisdom of rulers. Like, playwrights masked their commentary by setting plays in earlier mythic eras or in...
And he goes on and on and on, so they're fun to watch. And
now, Krista, this is on his website. You don't have to have a special
this is on
password
YouTube.
to see it.
No, this is on YouTube.
On YouTube.
Yep, and you can put in Crash Course, and there's there's so many different ones. So, science, social studies topics, any like you could put in, so we just finished reading Things Fall Apart in School. So any novel that you can come up with, it's in there. Yeah, it's fantastic. Yeah, he talks very fast. That's the challenge.
Yes.
You know, sometimes you have to watch it a couple times because, especially when he's making a joke, he makes it quickly. But I teach the same thing 4 times a day, so by the time I've heard it 4 times,
you got it.
I'm rolling in my chair. But, so, well, I can share with you a couple passages that I think are beautiful. Would you like that?
Good.
The eulogies, I think, are particularly nice. I can put the coffee down. It's like a security blanket, isn't it? There are several really good ones. Let's see. Where's the one from Hazel to Gus? Here it is. Okay. So at the funeral home, this is the eulogy that Hazel delivered. I took a few breaths and went back to the page. I can't talk about our love story, so I will talk about math. I am not a mathematician, but I know this. There are infinite numbers between 0 and 1. There's 0.1 and 0.12 and 0.112 and an infinite collection of others. Of course, there is a bigger infinite set of numbers between 0 and 2, or between 0 and 1,000,000. Some infinities are bigger than other infinities. A writer we used to like taught us that. There are days, many of them, when I resent the size of my unbounded set. I want more numbers than I'm likely to get, and God, I want more numbers for Augustus Waters than he got. But Gus, my love, I cannot tell you how thankful I am for our little infinity. I wouldn't trade it for the world. You gave me a forever within the numbered days, and I'm grateful. And that's just beautiful. Yeah. Isaac has some good ones too. His are quite funny. Actually, maybe I'll share the one that Augustus wrote. He says, here's the thing about Hazel. Almost everyone is obsessed with leaving a mark upon the world, bequeathing a legacy, outlasting death. We all want to be remembered. I do too. That's what bothers me most, is being another unremembered casualty in the ancient and inglorious war against disease. I want to leave a mark. But Van Houten, the marks that humans leave are too often scars. You build a hideous mini-mall or start a coup or try to become a rock star and you think they'll remember me now. But A, they don't remember you, and B, all you leave behind are more scars. Your coup becomes a dictatorship. Your mini-mall becomes a lesion. Okay, maybe I'm not such a shitty writer, but I can't pull my ideas together. My thoughts are stars I can't fathom into constellations. We are like a bunch of dogs squirting on fire hydrants. We poison the groundwater with our toxic piss, marking everything mine in a ridiculous attempt to survive our deaths. I can't stop pissing on fire hydrants. I know it's silly and useless, epically useless in my current state, but I'm an animal like any other. Hazel is different. She walks lightly. She walks lightly upon the earth. Hazel knows the truth. We're as likely to hurt the universe as we are to help it, and we're not likely to do either. People will say it's sad that she leaves a lesser scar, that fewer remember her, that she was loved deeply but not widely. But it's not sad, Van Houten. It's triumphant, it's heroic. Isn't that the real heroism? Like the doctors say, first, do no harm. The real heroes aren't anyway the people doing things. The real heroes are the people noticing things, paying attention. The guy who invented the smallpox vaccine didn't actually invent anything. He just noticed that people with cowpox didn't get smallpox. After my PET scan lit up, I snuck into the ICU and saw her while she was unconscious. I just walked in behind a nurse with a badge, and I got to sit next to her for like 10 minutes before I got caught. I really thought she was going to die before I could tell her that I was going to die too. It was brutal, the incessant mechanized haranguing of intensive care. She had this dark cancer water dripping out of her chest, eyes closed, intubated. But her hand was still her hand, still warm, and the nails painted this almost black dark blue. And I just held her hand and tried to imagine the world without us. And for about 1 second, I was a good enough person to hope she died so she would never know that I was going to also. But then I wanted more time so we could fall in love. I got my wish, I suppose. I left my scar. And I'll skip that part. It says, what else? She's so beautiful you don't get tired of looking at her. You never worry if she's smarter than you. You know she is. She's funny without ever being mean. I love her. I'm so lucky to love her. You don't get to choose if you get hurt in this world, but you do have some say in who hurts you. And I like my choices, and I hope she likes hers. And that's how the book ends. Mm-hmm. It's pretty good.
It's just a very convincing love story. I mean, it's more than that, but it's not less than that. And it's really, you know, I'm over 70 years old reading this for the first time, and this does have to me, it has the ring of relationships when I was this age. He's just really a talented writer. At the beginning, when they first meet each other, as well as at the end with the eulogies. And that is quite an achievement, to keep that authenticity of dialogue, you know.
The whole time.
The entire time. The entire time.
Mm-hmm.
I think too that one of the things I liked about it was, of course, you know, my teenage daughter and all her friends had read it before I even knew what it was about. And but reading it as an adult, as a parent, then you know there was the love story of the teens, but then I thought he also did a nice job of you're thinking about those parents, you know, all the parents affected there, and gosh, that whole grenade thing, oh my gosh, you know, it's just yeah, from the beginning to the end, it was really well done. Just a lot of so many relationships.
Yeah. And I think they're, like Hazel and Augustus, they're real people too, you know. You can see the fear You know, and as parents, I think we live that. You know, we live in that future and have a hard time living in the present. And it was well done. What else?
Do students, or do you have a favorite character? I mean, I tell you, Isaac is one of my absolute favorite characters. He's out of control. He's the person with one eye in the beginning that loses the eyes in really bad shape. He's the one who, with his girlfriend, who eventually dumps him. They say, they have this last word that they say to each other before they part. It's always.
Yeah.
You know? And
That's right.
And the terrible time in his life was when she stopped saying that to him. And
yeah, Isaac is really fun, especially when they're playing video games. And I'm not a video game person, and so I enjoyed those scenes. I thought they were funny. Oh gosh. Well, it's funny. You know, I think there's a lot of humor to it. You know, there's a lot of making fun of adults. You know, so they probably, yeah. Even just the improper use of literality, those are very funny lines. The literal heart of Jesus, that's a funny part. You know, that he chooses to put the cigarette in his mouth and not light it. You know, I think the quirkiness, perhaps, of the characters. It's a great love story, but I think it's a book for. I don't think it's just a chick novel. You know what I mean? I think that. No. I think it resonates with everyone. Well, we have a teenager among us. Can you share?
I'm a really big fan of John Green, just everything he does. I watch all of his YouTube channels and such. I just really appreciate love story and how teenagers can still feel the same way that adults do on so many different subjects and matters.
Yeah. And even the parents make sure to assure Hazel that this was the real thing. You know, he really loved you. It wasn't puppy love. And that's cool.
What I appreciate is so often when we meet people who are obviously ill, one way or another, that's what we see.
Yes.
And we don't, out of fear or whatever, that we don't get a chance to really get to know who they are. And so in the safe distance of being a reader, we get to see the funny and the poignant and the anger and all the things that are going on. So these real people who
Yeah.
happen to be sick.
Yeah, I was just tired of cancer today. You know, there's a couple lines like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. The Make-A-Wish Foundation, and, you know, the funny moment when he says to her, you know, tell me you didn't waste it, tell me. And she says, I was 13, you know, or something like that, because she used her Make-A-Wish to go to Disney World. You know.
held that against her for a while.
Like, she had a great time.
But she had a great time.
Yeah, exactly. Like I'm sure that is a very funny joke within and inside. If you get
Right.
the honor of making a wish or something like that, I'm sure that probably actually does exist in
Yeah.
cultural life.
Yeah. Or the side effects.
Great time.
Yeah, I agree. Or the side effect of cancer, or the side effects of dying, and but yeah, you do see. And I guess I also loved, to that point, Carolyn, the way that Hazel talks about the typical perception of kids with cancer. So this is the day or the moment where they're fighting the good fight with courage, and they never falter, and yet you see the real side of it. It's ugly. There's vomit and urine, and it's not pretty. And you have a lot of weak moments. So yeah, that was good too.
So I think it gives us the opportunity for perhaps more empathy.
Absolutely.
For parents
Absolutely.
or whoever is going through.
Yeah. Yeah, how often would we shy away from a girl who's carrying around an oxygen tank all the time and not see her as anything but that? Or even the line, do you remember in one of the funeral scenes, or someone says or posts something, and it's a very well-meaning thought, because we like to think about someone who has died as, going to heaven and being their whole healed self. That's a very comforting thought. And yet, Hazel said, does that mean when he was here he wasn't whole? That he was less of a person? Because of course Augustus was missing one of his, or at least half of one leg. And I never thought about that comment before, how that makes someone feel who's still in that not quite dead, not quite a living place, to feel, does that mean I'm not whole? That I'm just waiting, that, I don't know, that made me feel a greater sensitivity, I think. I think it resonates with anyone who's lost someone, whether it's, serious illness or a sudden accident or whatever. I just think grief is grief.
Absolutely.
You mentioned the literal heart of Jesus several times. What is
So
that
in the
about?
support group,
It's in a church.
it's in a church,
Oh.
in a basement or some room, and there's a cross on the floor, and they circle up or they gather in the part of the cross where Jesus' heart would have been on the cross. And Patrick, the support group leader, who begins every story with the story of his testicular cancer. And so Hazel always...
Just in case you forgot. The last time, he goes
yes.
over it again.
And so
every
there
time.
may be new people there, so every time he tells his story. And she writes about it with such, for wanting people to be sensitive about her situation, she can be very insensitive about Patrick's. Anyway, so he always begins with prayer and, dear Jesus, we are gathered here in your heart. We are literally in your heart. And so then she and Augustus are just beside themselves because they're not literally in his heart. So it's this whole misuse of, literal. And so they always refer to, do you have time to meet up at the literal heart of Jesus? Which becomes a kind of name for the support group. But they keep going back.
Yes, and they do. One of the things I love too is that, again, I can't remember how old Patrick's supposed to be, but he's a goof and they pick on him. But in the long run, when he finds out that her mother is studying or working on some kind of degree, and when Hazel puts it all together, like you would be a Patrick, that's
Yeah.
what you're studying to be.
Yeah.
Is a support group
Yeah.
person.
Yeah.
I can't remember, and how happy she is.
Yeah.
And I remember I was so happy,
Yeah.
that I can't even talk about it without crying, that her mother was going to be okay.
Yeah. That she was going to have a plan.
Yes,
And how happy that made Hazel.
yes, so happy.
And I think, I remember when a good friend of mine was diagnosed with leukemia, and she was comforting us. Here we were supposed to be the ones that were reaching out and helping her, and we were trying. And she was sensing everyone else's pain. And it was an odd thing to find yourself being comforted by the person that shouldn't be the one doing the comforting. And I think this book explored that nicely, that it is something that affects everyone. And maybe we do need to be careful, that we don't make our grief with someone's situation a greater load for them to bear. And I guess I hadn't thought about that. Yeah.
First of all, I want to say that I dragged my boys to the movie.
Good for you.
We're kind of bored. Their girlfriends, my niece was
they were at was our church, Second Pres, which is dumb because then, and my friend who doesn't go to this church, she said, yeah, I thought it was Second Pres. Well, when I reread the book, it says on the page, St. Paul's Episcopal, but it felt like our church. So I was wondering, do we have a support group like that for teenagers? Just curious. I don't know if St. Paul says, but I thought, do you know if,
I
I
don't
don't.
think so.
and
Carolyn?
do we have one for adult support cancer group here?
We have a grief support group through the counseling center and other support groups for other things, Parkinson's support, and
Right.
things like that.
And you may have added for families with gay and lesbian and, well, I mean, that's not the same word, but, so anyhow, like you said, it was funny, my friend thought it was our church, and then I just thought, well, I hope we have something like that, if it was needed, if they didn't have one as close as St. Paul.
Well, you bring up just the location in the Indianapolis area, and wasn't it fun to read about streets and locations of things, and you know, at the very end being in Holiday Park, and that was so neat.
They actually filmed it, if I'm not mistaken.
Did they? I haven't seen the movie. I generally don't go see the movies. I like things in my head the way I've imagined them. And most of the time I'm disappointed because I imagined it differently. Not because I did a bad job, just because of my own stubborn, selfish, you know, I like it my way, you know. So I don't know. Now, so every once in a while, you know, someone will convince me, you know what, you would like this one, you should go and see it. I thought The Help, for instance, was done very well.
Yes. Yes.
You thought so?
Because usually the book's 10 times.
Oh, yeah. It was good. Did they make her the bloated face, or did they keep her cute with just a cannula?
She was on the
Okay.
cute side.
Okay.
Wasn't she? Since you brought up Stuck in Church and the church, the original thinking on this whole series, and particularly on this book, was that it would be of interest to young adults, and that there may be some resources in here for ministry to young adults, for outreach to young adults, for drawing young adults towards subjects that were both of interest to them and of sufficient substance and quality for the church and its staff to be interactive with. So, and Krista and I have had a conversation about this. It's very natural for her to also to think of ways in which that would be the case. And I would like us to spend our last few minutes here thinking about that. It seems to be a very potent, it seems to me, after reading it and thinking about it, this is indeed a very potent crossroads for that kind of work. Is it so for you? Do you see it that way? And Krista, you may want to help us there too.
Yeah, let me open up, let me just read a few passages. Towards the end, they're at Holiday Park having a picnic. She says, I was just trying to notice everything, the light on the ruined ruins, this little kid who could barely walk discovering a stick at the corner of the playground, my indefatigable, I hate that word, mother zigzagging mustard across her turkey sandwich, my dad patting his handheld in his pocket and resisting the urge to check it. A guy throwing a frisbee that his dog kept running under and catching and returning to him. Who am I to say that these things might not be forever? Who is Peter Van Houten to assert as fact the conjecture that our labor is temporary? All I know of heaven and all I know of death is in this park, an elegant universe in ceaseless motion, teeming with ruined ruins and screaming children. And I love that. I love that at the very end of it all, that Hazel leaves the door open. And I think that that is so important. And when students come to me, and you know, I teach in a place where faith is really important, and I think it's important to question, and I think it's important to allow yourself to not know. And I think faith has to be a choice. And I always tell kids, you know what, leave the door open and pray to God to help you with your unbelief. And as long as you leave a door open, as long as you can allow some space for questioning, then God can work in your life and things will become clear over time. And I think that that's important. I think sometimes in our efforts to pin things down and analyze it and quantify it, we diminish the beauty of the mystery. And I think that that turns a lot of people off, especially a lot of young people. I think, I believe that sometimes the being okay with not knowing and choosing to believe is important. It's an important first step. And so I like that about this book, because I feel like there's a lot of questioning that happens. And even her dad says, where is it? I just had it. She says to him, they're talking about something that he thinks is defeatist. Oh, he read An Imperial Affliction. And she says, well, if by defeatist you mean honest, then I agree. And he says, I don't think defeatism is honest. I refuse to accept that. And she says, so everything happens for a reason, and we'll all go live in the clouds and play harps and live in mansions? And then he goes on to say, you know what I believe? I remember in college I was taking this math class, this really great math class taught by this tiny old woman. She was talking about fast Fourier transforms, could be Fourier, and she stopped mid-sentence and said, sometimes it seems the universe wants to be noticed. That's what I believe. I believe the universe wants to be noticed. I think the universe is improbably biased toward consciousness, that it rewards intelligence in part because the universe enjoys its elegance being observed. And who am I, living in the middle of history, to tell the universe that it, or my observation of it, is temporary? So I think leaving that door open is good.
Very well said. Krista, I headed up a school of Christian education for a little while, and that saying, as long as we leave the door open, God will have room to work, it's like a motto. I think a motto of education, as the church tries to do it sometimes with success. Not all the time.
Not all the time.
Not all the time.
Because we close the door ourselves.
Oh, yeah.
Very often, yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Other comments? We have a few more minutes.
Thank you for coming.
Yes.
It's so hard to do a regular thing with them. There was a couple of things. Well, it made me sad when he said he lost touch with all of his basketball friends. My son actually played for North Central basketball. I thought, oh, I know he's a fictional character, but I thought, could he have ever forgotten one of his friends, players with cancer? I mean, right now they do fundraisers for a girl, one of the players' sister who has cancer. So maybe a couple of things for the youth would be to make sure to reach out, or just one time to someone, or even a movie night with the, say, Second Press Youth. Would you like to go see a movie? Had it been this movie coming out, maybe they could all go as a group, and that would be fun.
Yeah.
It doesn't always have to be a setting like this, because, but it was so, it really reached out to a lot of the kids.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you can ever have John Green. He actually gave a eulogy at the funeral of my son's middle school teacher.
Really?
After the funeral,
Huh.
some of this young youth actually took selfies with him. Our teacher would have loved that. I just knew if she had seen that. Some people thought it was inappropriate. Our teacher and most of the people there, and he was best friends with the teacher's son, and she just would have loved this. I thought, oh, what if he really reached out to the youth? So maybe a movie night or a movies afternoon.
Sure.
Yeah, I think he focuses a lot on relationships, doesn't he? And real relationships. And and taking care of people in life and not just waiting. And I think even the piece with social media and, all the posting that went on in the wake of one of the deaths, but those people hadn't been around. And I think it says something that we need to be careful that we're not just about, jumping on the bandwagon when it's all said and done, but are we putting in the time and reaching out? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, some of the power of John Green to me is that, going back to something Carolyn said, when people are sick, it's trouble. It's trouble relating to them, even if you know them already. But if you don't know them already, it's a particular problem. First of all, you don't know about what sickness it is. I want you all to know, what he says at the end. You remember Planxifor, I think is the name of this drug that...
Planxifor, yeah, that she was on.
He makes it up. There's no such drug. The power of his imagination is such that he gets you to move beyond what will block you. What will block you in life is a disease, and then you see a cancer case, and then you see all these different things that can separate this person from you. It's difficult. There's a kind of normal human difficulty in dealing with someone that has a special disease, particularly a debilitating one. Can we work on this with our teens? You bet we can. And can Green help us do that? Absolutely. Yeah. Part of it is just the imaginative power of getting you to see, every time you turn the page, the most interesting person that you're going to in the next scene is a sick person, all the time, because they're all sick. Yeah. And so it's a very good field of
perspectives,
relationships, to help people of all ages get more empathetic and get into relationship with people that others maybe have some difficulty. Carolyn.
I want to think about how that's done, what you said, because I want to think about that being an intergenerational experience.
Yeah. Oh.
Because I think that we grown-ups who may have figured some things out, or think we have, had a lot to learn from that book. Yeah. And have a lot to learn from sitting alongside young people who read that book and feel what they have to say.
Yeah, indeed.
I've been, as I do periodically from time to time, share books about death, dying, and heaven with people who are thinking about it with their children. And one of the very important things to say to them is, this is not a book to put in their hands and just
yeah.
Some of my favorite books are the ones that leave space for that one, that are just pictures. Talk about pictures, talk about what you see and what you feel in there.
Yeah.
The kids talk about what they see and what they feel, and you talk about what you see and what you feel and what you understand and imagine to be true.
Yeah, that's so important.
So that alongside, I think, the good conversations that happen either around the family table,
sure,
on those things, or in a classroom,
or the swing set.
Yeah. We have a wonderful resource in our library.
Oh yes, indeed.
About the ways that we share the things that are down there and how they can be useful to families or small groups.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Technically, we've run our hour out now, and Krista has said that she will stay a while, a few minutes afterwards, if you'd like to speak with her further. But let's show Krista a measure of our appreciation for all that she's done tonight.
Thanks.
Thank you, Krista.
Thanks. Such a fun experience to be mic'd and feel important.
Please stop by the cookie tray.
You should show your students this video.
Oh, they see enough of me. Sometimes I record discussions and make them listen.